Okay, start the recording.
Yep. And is there not, why is it still saying no attendees?
Okay, it's live now. I just should be live.
Yep, here we go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, but if you'd like to, go ahead and enter your name and your organization in the chat box and say hello to your fellow attendees. Once again, folks who are just joining us, good morning, welcome. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. While we wait, while we wait to get started, just wanted to have you guys make ample use of the chat time by saying hello and say who you are and where you're from. Good morning, everybody. Once again, we're going to get started in probably about 1, maybe 2 minutes. While we wait for folks to jump on, go ahead and make use of the chat box by saying hello to your fellow attendees and panelists, and let us know who you are and where you're from. All right, well, let's get started, everybody. Good morning, welcome. My name is Joan Service, and I am the Executive Director of the Arizona Housing Coalition. We are so delighted to have you join us this morning for a conversation about Community First in Austin, Texas. A few housekeeping notes. You can see us, but we can't see you. This isn't a typical Zoom meeting, but a webinar. And so with that note, I'll ask that we'll work through any tech issues that we have on our end, but we ask for your advance grace. But just because we can't see you doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So please make ample use of the chat function to say hello and share who you are and where you work, and to chat with your fellow attendees. Share any nuggets or aha moments. Share any kind of best practices that you're hearing in Arizona that replicates what you're going to hear about occurring in Austin, Texas. As well as make use of the Q&A function for any questions you have for Amber or any of today's panelists. We'll do our best to answer your questions this morning. And then finally wanted to share that we are recording this morning's chat. We will be sending it out to all registered attendees. So if you can't stay with us the whole time, or if you'd like to share that link with folks who weren't able to be here this morning. For folks unfamiliar with the Arizona Housing Coalition, just wanted to spend a minute to share with you a little bit about us. We are a statewide collaborative association that leads in the efforts to end homelessness and advocates for safe, affordable homes for all Arizonans. The Housing Coalition works to end and address the root cause of homelessness by ensuring a robust support service delivery system and an adequate supply of safe, affordable homes for all Arizonans. We work towards this mission by focusing on public policy advocacy, increasing awareness, assisting the community, and ensuring a highly skilled workforce equipped with best practices and the latest knowledge and connections, because it's all about connections, to end homelessness and address the lack of affordable homes in our state. But enough about me and the Housing Coalition. Today, we're joined by several amazing folks. First, I'm joined by my fellow panelist, Jessica Berg, who many of you know serves as the Chief Program Officer for St. Vincent de Paul. She joined me and our other panelist and sponsor of this program, John Bradley, president of Brookfield Residential, on a tour of Community First. In fact, it was John's bright idea to suggest to the group, as the governor of the Governor's Goal Council on Ending Homelessness, the Affordable Housing Task Force, to go visit Community First in Austin. And last but certainly not least, the star of the show, Amber Fogarty, president of Mobile Loaves and Fishes. In Amber's role as president of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, she is responsible for ensuring that the organization's vision, mission, strategy, core values, and goals are embodied and evangelized. Mobile Loaves and Fishes empowers communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless and is the visionary behind Austin's innovative Community First Village, a 51-acre master plan development that provides affordable, permanent housing and supportive community. Oh, I love that, supportive community for the chronically homeless in Central Texas. Prior to joining Mobile Loaves and Fishes, Amber served as the Director of Learning and Leadership for Mission Capital, where she created and facilitated leadership development programs for Central Texas leaders. She also spent 11 years as an adjunct instructor at St. Edward's University. Amber has been an advocate for men and women experiencing homelessness for more than 16 years. Her deep passion for serving homeless neighbors was ignited during a year of service at Andre House of Arizona, a house of hospitality for the homeless and working poor in downtown Phoenix. Amber received a bachelor's degree in communication and an MBA in marketing from St. Edward University, as well as a master's of art in philanthropy and development from St. Mary's University of Minnesota. She resides in Austin, Texas with her husband, Martin, and her 2 children, Grace and Colin. I will share that Amber has worn the title of both of Chief Goodness Officer, Servant Leader, and Dealer in Hope. Man, that title just kind of like resonated with me, Dealer in Hope. And as I just shared, she has roots in Arizona, a fellow ambassador of the work that we're doing here locally. Woohoo! Thank you, Amber. Now, before I turned it over to John, I just got to share one personal anecdote that I have to get off my chest. It's a little embarrassing, to be honest. When I first started as the executive director of the then Arizona Coalition to End Homelessness, I still remember, oh, this is cringe. I still remember my 2 board members, Steve Capobris and Brad Bridwell, interviewing me and asking me, "So Joan, how do you end homelessness?" And I cringe at my answer, thinking about, my lack of understanding of the system, the whole service delivery and the housing spectrum, because my response was a very immature answer, something along the lines of, "Oh, you pass out socks to build relationships with folks on the streets." And believe me, there's something to be said for that. But how do you end homelessness? By housing, of course. And I've learned that through the years. But what I learned for my visit from Community First, it's not just housing, it's community. Just gonna leave that there. And with that, I'll turn it over to John. And John, you are muted, so you might want to go on off.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan. And thanks for bringing Amber and Jessica to this panel. This is fantastic. So I think Joan just wanted me to give a little background as to how we got started and try to keep it brief. And the last part is hard, but what I'll tell you is I'm with Brookfield Residential, and we plan, design, develop, and operate master plans. And you may wonder, why do we need to hear about this guy doing master plans? You'll understand in a few minutes. I went to a corporate retreat for our company in Austin, Texas. We have a business there, and they invited a gentleman to speak there by the name of Alan Graham. And Alan is somewhat of an understated person, you might think with everything he's accomplished that he's some big evangelist. He's not. But when he speaks, everybody listens. It's amazing. And he spoke to this group and described a master plan community for the homeless. I can tell you, I was in awe. I've never heard of any such thing. And given that that's what I do for a living, I went out the next day and took a tour. And I came back here and I said, Joan talks about her first interview. I knew nothing about how to deal with homelessness. So I made a mistake. I went to talk to my good friend, Mike Traylor, and that no good deed goes unpunished. Before I knew it, Mike had me on the governor's council with Carol Dittmore. And we talked for a while and I mentioned my trip and my tour. And there was a lot of interest, and over time that interest grew. And we decided we'd put together a trip to Austin to see Community First. We did that in January last year, just before COVID. And the group that went, just to give you an idea, when I say I know nothing about homelessness, here's the group that went. Sam Lavis from Home Aid, Mike Traylor, Father Dan from Andre House, Terry Benelli from LISC, Carol Dittmore and Ruby Dillon Williams from the Housing Department. Dan Clockey did not go. Dan is on our governor's council, but he introduced me to his wife, Shannon Clancy, at St. Vincent. And before you knew it, Jessica and Steve Zabilski were attending with us. Howard Epstein, Sheila Harris, Heather Davenport from Housing, and a friend of mine, Todd Hornback. So we had a really strong group of people that went, and I think we all learned a ton. So I won't go any further into that. Amber will cover that, but that's where this came from. And one of the conclusions we had there is these people are special. And by the way, I hadn't met Amber the first time, and I thought, how could we replicate a guy like Alan Graham? Well, Amber's pretty much right up there. So, and you'll see that shortly. And when we finished, we thought, I don't know if we can replicate this, the scale, and Amber will talk about the scale that they have. But Joan, Jessica, Steve, nobody will give this up. And we're going to continue to talk about it and see if there are ways to utilize this great accomplishment that they have in Austin as a model. So with that, am I handing it directly to Amber, Joan, or back to you?
Yeah, let's turn it over to Amber, and then we'll we have a list of questions for Amber, but then Jessica will share her thoughts before we pepper her with questions. Amber, why don't you take it away?
Well, first of all, let me just tell you how honored I am to be with all of you today. My journey into really understanding my passion for people experiencing homelessness started in Arizona. It started when I moved there in 2004 to do a year of service at Andre House. And I spent that year there. And then when I completed my year of service, I transitioned into a role with St. Joseph the Worker Job Service and was part of the opening of the Human Services campus. And so Arizona is near and dear to my heart. And I can tell you that this visit that John just described to you, for me, was such a powerful full circle moment to have this incredible group come from Arizona, wanting to learn about Community First Village and the work that we do here. Having Father Dan from Andre House there for me was particularly special because he was the associate pastor at my church here in Austin before he was assigned at Andre House. And so he is a friend of mine, and it was just amazing to have this incredible group from Arizona here. And there are cities all across the country that are replicating the Community First model. But I will tell you that when it happens in Phoenix, Arizona, my rejoicing will be off the charts because the city is so special to me and the state of Arizona means so much to me. And so being able to be part of this conversation today is just a gift. And I'm really thankful that all of you are here. And I want you to know how grateful I am for the work that you do. When you are introducing yourselves in the chat, I am familiar with most of the organizations represented here from my time in Phoenix, and you all do such important and valuable work. And I'm really grateful to be among such incredible and humble servant leaders who are serving our neighbors with incredible care every single day. So thanks for inviting me, and I'm excited to dive into all the questions you have.
Fantastic. Jessica, before you go, before we start with the questions, would you mind sharing your kind of 30-second or longer kind of perspective of Community First, what your aha moments were, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Sure. I remember when I first learned of Community First, and I watched this amazing 3-minute video that brought me to tears and still brings me to tears every time I watch it. And I think it was really Alan Graham saying, housing doesn't end homelessness, community ends homelessness. And I don't know how much of it was an aha moment or just a huge relief for me that I wasn't crazy, that someone else had thought about these ideas and written about these ideas and created a whole village based on these ideas. And when we visited and saw it in person, I took so many pictures, and it felt so validating and inspiring that I have a picture of the street signs that are the cross streets of Goodness and Hope Way, or I don't remember exactly, but so much about the philosophy, and everything I saw touched me so much. And I thought, this is how to end homelessness in the most dignified, respectful way. And I remember, how do I say this without it sounding so woo-woo? And I remember seeing all your residents walk around, and some of them looked like a stereotypical person that you might see on the street, except they were standing tall, and they were smiling, and they were clean, and they were themselves, and they were encouraged to be themselves in whatever challenges with mental illness or whatever was going on with them. And they were given the space and the community support to have a safe place to be and to thrive in a way that worked for them. So I'm not sure why I was given the honor of being a panelist, other than I absolutely could not hide my incredible enthusiasm for what I saw. So
You were on fire, and I cannot. You're up for it.
Yeah. So thanks, Amber. Thanks for everything you do every day and modeling what I think we all want to be able to do. So that goes right into the first. We have some sort of categories of questions, and the first one is just about your philosophy and what Community First Village is all about. And so I'll kind of group the first two questions together, because I imagine you'll touch on them both. So for those who are new to the Community First model, tell us about the philosophy behind the model. What is at the heart of the village? And then your founder, Alan Graham, wrote a fantastic book, Welcome Homeless. And he talks about a relational housing model versus a transactional housing model. And tell us about the difference and how the relational model plays out in your community.
Absolutely. So we've already mentioned that Mobile Loaves Fishes has created Community First Village, which is right now a 51-acre master plan community. It is growing, and I'll be telling you all more about that as we go through this conversation. But it is the most special place I've ever been in my life. It brings me so much joy to be here and be part of this community. So there are really two philosophies that underpin everything that we do, two beliefs that we hold very dear at Mobile Loaves and Fishes. And the first is we believe very profoundly that the single greatest cause of homelessness is the profound catastrophic loss of family. And that the reason the village exists, the reason that we do what we do, is to create a forged family, right? To bring people together in relationship with each other. And all of us that are part of this conversation, we've been doing this work for quite some time. And for me, Jessica described her, her kind of aha moment, and Joan has described hers, John has described his, right? There's these aha moments that come along in your life. And for me, the first time I met Alan Graham, which is about 14 years ago, I heard him say those words: the single greatest cause of homelessness is the profound catastrophic loss of family. And I had been at that point doing this work for, maybe 4 or 5 years. And I was always so frustrated when people talked about the causes of homelessness, because I felt like it never quite got to the heart of it for me. I'm like, yes, there's mental illness, and yes, there's addiction, and yes, there's affordable housing and living wages and a broken foster care system. There's all of these things that contribute to it. But ultimately, when he brought that phrase into my life, the light bulb went on, and it really helped me to crystallize something that I had been coming to understand about my friends who I loved so much, that very few of them came from a healthy, wholesome family, right? There was so much brokenness and so much struggle. For all of us, right, we have our nuclear family, we have an extended family, and all of us have a forged family, right? The people that we've chosen to be part of our lives, the people that we've brought around us, because not all of us come from a healthy, intact family, right? All of us have some struggle in our families that make those relationships difficult. And so we create a forged family to ensure that we have the love and the care and the support that we need. And really, our friends who have experienced homelessness, it's that whole support system that's underneath you, the nuclear family, the extended family, the forged family, it broke apart, right? It eroded to a place where it no longer existed. And that was when homelessness resulted for them, right? That was where it happened. And so one of the things that Alan and I have been talking a lot about, and actually we're working on a position paper about homelessness that we're going to publish next month. And one of the key concepts in that is that homelessness arrives at the intersection of so many broken systems. And so when people talk about homelessness and they say, we can end it, I'm like, yes, we can. But in order to end it, let's talk about all of the broken systems that we have to address. We have a very broken healthcare system. We have a broken system for addiction recovery. The foster care system has a tremendous amount of brokenness and struggle in it. Our education system has brokenness. And when you look at all of these different systems, our friends have been impacted by all of them in some way, right? There's just all of these different through lines. And for some of our neighbors, when I hear their story, it's literally like, wow, look at all of these systems that broke down. And so the profound catastrophic loss of family was the superhighway that got them there, but there were also all of these other roads that brought them in. And the way that we have visualized it is it's a roundabout, right? So you get into the roundabout of homelessness and you come from all of these different broken systems. But when you get in the roundabout, sometimes you can't exit, because those very systems that are broken that got you into homelessness are sometimes so broken that you can't get back out. So that whole concept and understanding really helps us to formulate why we do what we do at Community First Village, and why we've created this village with all of these support systems around it, with all of these wraparound services, right, to help care for people, but with relationship at the center, with love for them at the center. So Jessica mentioned that we believe that housing alone will never solve homelessness, but community will. And that's really key to our philosophy at Community First Village, right? When people come here, I will tell you, people come from all over the world to visit the village. And sometimes they come because they think tiny homes are the most precious things they've ever seen in their lives. And sometimes they come because we have 3D printed homes, and that's innovative and that's never been done before. But every time someone comes here, I want them to leave understanding that what we do here, that the homes are necessary, but they're insufficient to the needs of our neighbors, right? The homes is not what this village is about. It's about the community that we've created. It's about the human to human, heart to heart relationships that are part of every single day. And so if you read Alan's book, Welcome Homeless, which I highly recommend, you'll see just these themes kind of woven through the book. But really that relational approach is key, right? And at times if you look at the homelessness system, right, you look at the way that we address homelessness across this country, there's a lot about it that can be really transactional, right? And even when I think back on my history, I've worked in an emergency shelter. Obviously I spent a year at Andre House where we were doing just the basic needs, right? Feeding people, providing showers, and giving people a place to do their laundry, right? But the difference makers are the organizations, the leaders, the people that really understand that if we want to change anything for the people that we serve, that we have to look in their eyes and we have to know them, right? So we believe there are two profound characteristics for all of us. We need to be fully and wholly known, and we need to be fully and wholly loved. And so that's what the village is about. I want to know our neighbors, and I want to know them so that I can love them. Because the more I know them, the more I know their story, the deeper my love is for them. And I will tell you that I love our neighbors who live here so much. They are part of our family, and I love that my family spends a lot of time here. I love that my kids know so many of our neighbors, and I'll say, "Let me tell you what Shorty said today," and they know exactly who Shorty is, and they're like, "He's so silly," like he's part of our family. And my kids have grown up with a whole lot of extra aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, depending on the age of our neighbors. It kind of covers the whole range, but they've grown up with extra members of the family who love them and care for them. And that's a really, really special thing to have created, right? To be part of. And that's really the invitation that we have for everyone that is looking to replicate this model. Is what we're replicating is a community where love is at the center of everything that we do.
I know I was only there for a few hours, but for those of you thinking, like, what is she talking about? Is this place real? Yes, it is real. That is like, I feel like after every question, I'm going to need a little like nap to just digest all of it again. So thank you. Another thing that's at the core of the success or the model is faith. And you can see that around. And so how do you integrate the religious underpinnings of Community First with the diverse makeup of Austin's residents, and not just Austin, but obviously not all people experiencing homelessness are people of faith or a specific faith. So for example, how do you address Austin's burgeoning LGBTQ homeless population that seek homes at Community First?
Great question. So yeah, that's an awesome question. So, I always explain to people that Mobile Loaves and Fishes, you can tell from the name, right? It's a biblical name. The loaves and the fishes, the multiplication, right? That story is really central to who we are. But as an organization, we are founded on our faith, but we believe that our faith is best practiced in action. And so we are not, we don't feel the need to beat people over the head with it. We want to be people of faith that you can tell who we are by the way that we behave every day, by the way that we love people. And, for us at the core of that is that every human person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. They deserve to be loved. And so everyone is welcome at Community First Village, regardless of everything. And, quite frankly, sometimes I find this, I always find this question, because we get asked the particular question about whether LGBTQ neighbors are welcomed in the village. And I'm a bit baffled by it, because I'm always like, it is central to who we are to love people and love them for how they were created. And that's core to Mobile Loaves and Fishes, that we love our neighbors and we love them in their full humanity, in every gift that they have been given. And it's our great joy to bring them home and to see those gifts get to come to the surface. We have a neighbor named Jessica, and she's one of the most remarkable people I've ever known in my life. Her story is heartbreaking. She's transgender. She grew up as Jason, and today she is Jessica, and she is one of the most brilliant women I've ever met in my life. Her story is hard and heartbreaking, but she has published, since she's been at Community First Village, 2 books. She's published a children's book, and then she's published a book that is her own poetry and prose that really encompasses the story of her life. Jessica is not able to read or write. She wrote that entire book using voice to text, basically speaking into her iPad. And then one of our missionals, who I'll tell you all about in a little bit, helped her to take that and create it into her own book of her poetry and prose. But then she wrote an incredible children's book that I love reading to my kids, that really is all about what it's like to grow up and be different from everyone else and be judged for it. And that the kind of world that she wants all of us to live in is a world where we stop judging people and we just spend more time loving them. And, Mother Teresa, said it best: if we judge people, we don't have time to love them. And that's really a core philosophy at Mobile Loaves and Fishes. We believe that if we spend too much time judging our friends, we don't have time to love them. So we just leave the judgment aside. And I believe that one of the great gifts of what we do, and one of our core goals as an organization, is to transform the stereotypes of people who have found themselves experiencing homelessness. And those stereotypes are deep and heart-wrenching. And I will tell you, early in my journey, when I was doing a speaking engagement in Phoenix, I had someone approach me after I finished, and I was speaking. I was at Andre House at the time and had spoken about homelessness. And a man approached me afterwards with a very smug look on his face. And he told me that he knew how we could solve homelessness. And I should have known better, because the smug look should have said it all. But I said, that's great. What's your idea? We should put them all in the Grand Canyon, and we should put a bomb in there, and that'll take care of them. And that moment has stuck with me from the very beginning, from the earliest years that I've done this work. And I've heard various versions of that response for the entire 17 years that I've been doing this. And it affects me like this every time, because these are our neighbors. These are our brothers and sisters. These are our friends. And I want the world to love them like we do. Right. And I think that all of us in our servant leadership have the opportunity to pave the way for people to love them and to know them and to hear their stories and to recognize that they're the most resilient people that books will ever meet. And they have stories of survival that, truly just take your breath away, that what they have lived through and what they have survived. And I will tell you that some of the most valuable things that I've learned in my life, and I've had the opportunity to work with and alongside incredible leaders and mentors, but the most valuable things that I've learned from my friends who have experienced homelessness. They are my teachers. And I want them to be the teachers for the rest of the world too.
Wow, thank you, Amber. You're right. I do need that kind of quiet time contemplation after your answers. But Amber, I think it's the Grand Canyon comment. I'm embarrassed that you had that experienced that in Arizona. But I also think that speaks to the community and political will that we need to garner in our work. And we'll get to some more conversations around that. But wow, and Jessica talked about well, actually, Amber, I'm just going to share that when I remember asking you specifically, we were touring the village, and I said, and I admit I wasn't smug, but I did have a chip on my shoulder and said, okay, let's peel back the curtain and really see what this community first thing is all about. Like, are you going to make people convert to get housing? What's this all about? And that's because I had really focused on a housing first philosophy. But I think you flip that script just just the name itself, community first. I remember kind of talking to you about it, and you said, look, we understand our neighbors are having, bouts of depression and bouts of substance abuse, and we just love on them and we love them, and we connect that heart to heart conversation. I remember you saying, we're not going to stop them, but it's literally that harm reduction model in action.
Yeah.
In action.
Yeah, I actually have a great story that happened on Saturday when I was here.
Yeah.
There's a documentary that's being done that is going to feature Community First Village. And so we were here, we were getting ready to film. And one of the members of the film crew said, hey, somebody just told me that someone's laying down, like they're laying on the path. So someone needs to go check on them. And so, of course, there I am hauling over there, like somebody's laying down on the ground. Want to make sure, like, do they need medical attention? What's happening? And I approached our neighbor, and I'll use a different name than his real name. Let's say his name is Gary. And so I walk over there and I see Gary laying on the ground, and he's got his hands under him, and he's literally laying on a concrete path. And I know that he has been he's been in a particularly, he's schizophrenic, but he's been in a particularly manic state for the last several weeks. And so I approached him and just put my hand on his shoulder, and I asked him if he was okay. And I said, are you hurt? What's happening? And he just looked up at me and he said, I was tired. And I said, okay. And I said, well, this doesn't look like the most comfortable place to take a nap. Could I walk you to your house? Like, that way you could be laying in your bed, because this doesn't look super comfortable right now. And he thought about it for a second, and he looked up and he's like, okay. And so he gets up, and so we walked to his house, walk him in. And then I went, we have a farm team here. We have a full organic farm on site. And so he is part of our organic farming team. And so I went to talk to one of our team members who I saw on the farm and said, hey, just want to let you know what just happened with Gary. And, I know he's having a really hard time right now. And she tells me that, she said, yeah, I talked to him this morning, and he just looked at me and he said, yeah, I'm real manic right now. And she's like, yeah, I know it's really hard. What can we do together about that? And he's like, well, sometimes I just need you to look at me and go, you're being real manic, and just remind me that I'm being real manic, and he was telling her what he needs. And so he's in this state, but he's also very aware of the level that he's at. Right. And so, but I think about what happened with him on Saturday. And I think about if he had lived in any other apartment complex, right? Like if he had lived in a scattered site model and he was laying on the concrete, 911 would have gotten called, right? They would have come, and someone might have whisked him away, to care. And really he is good here, right? He's got the community around him, and he's got eyes on him, people that are checking on him. And it's that true harm reduction model where there's a whole bunch of us, right? And so before I left on Saturday, I checked in with multiple other people, several who live really close by, and said, hey, will you just check on him later today and just make sure he's doing okay, because that he's having a hard time. And every response I got was already on it. Everybody's already on it, because that's what community does.
Nice. You talked earlier about resiliency, and I cannot think that Community First Village hasn't experienced that definition of resiliency more than in the last year or so. Just, how have you guys fared with the storms and that power outages?
Yeah, well, let's start with storms and power outage, then we'll go to COVID, because I feel like, we have this, unprecedented winter storm in Austin, Texas, 6 inches of snow, which I never thought I'd see the day that would happen here. But that's, of course, in the midst of, being almost a full year into the realities of the pandemic and what that has meant for our community. But the winter storm was an unbelievable experience. I feel like Community First Village we were incredibly lucky in that where we are located, we happen to be near some critical infrastructure. And so we never lost power or water at the village, which was such a blessing. But what we saw here was remarkable. It was true community, neighbors checking on neighbors. And we've been compiling all of the stories from what happened during that week, where, one neighbor, told me that, hey, I had some extra spaghetti, so I made an extra big pot of spaghetti, and then I took it to a few of the neighbors that live close to me. Another neighbor who knew that the neighbor that lived close to him had some mobility challenges, so he got out and shoveled his walkway for him. a group of neighbors came together to make sure that the walkway into Unity Hall, where we were doing some food pickups, was completely clear of ice, that they made sure everything was clear so that their neighbors could get there safely. So I've been telling people, I believe Community First Village fared better than really any other neighborhood in Austin that I know about, because the community is that strong. That also has a lot to do with our missionals. So I've mentioned that already, and I'll just want to describe quickly what the missionals are. So 20% of the folks that live at Community First Village have never experienced homelessness themselves. We call them missional neighbors, and they are called to live in community. They are called to be part of the forged family of Community First Village. And they are some of the most amazing people I've ever known, just humble servants who are here to love people and care for people and really just be family to our friends. And so they came together along with our neighbors who had experienced homelessness, this amazing partnership to say, how do we take care of this village? How do we make sure? So every single day during the storm, every neighbor was called, was either called on the phone, texted, or someone came to their door. And some days, all three of those things happened, right? So someone literally was laying eyes on them every day. Do you have what you need? Do you have water? Do you have food? What can we get for you? And I see the question in there about, are the missionals paid? No, the missionals are all there. This is complete service for them. In fact, they pay the same rent that neighbors pay to live here. But they are here to just love our friends. And it's a really, really beautiful thing. So we fared the winter storm, I think we had about 40 homes that had pipes that burst and things like that, which, happened all over the city. Our maintenance team was on it, and it was fixed here faster, I think, than any other community. Our maintenance team was here as soon as things started to melt, and they got everything repaired in record time to make sure that we got our folks back up and running. And then we were getting people bottled water for the ones that had the pipes that burst, or people whose pipes were frozen, so that they were able to care for themselves during the time that they weren't able to access their water. So that all went well. COVID has been, quite a journey for the last year, but I stand here, and we're almost at 1 year since Austin announced the cancellation of South by Southwest, which was in Austin for us the moment where we all knew that this was really going to be a serious thing. That was the moment of reality in Austin, Texas. Wow, they're canceling South by, where people come from all over the world, and it's a huge economic driver for our city, and they canceled it. Oh no, this means that this thing is going to really have impact that we probably can't even fathom. And that was true. But I stand here almost 1 year later to tell you that exactly 0 neighbors who have experienced homelessness, who live in this village, have had COVID. Not one. And so it turns out that our model is built for social distancing, and it's worked out very beautifully. We have had a few staff members that have contracted it. They've all contracted it elsewhere, not here at the village. And luckily, we had the right protocols in place to ensure that it didn't spread anywhere else, which is beautiful. And then we also had a few of the missional neighbors that contracted it. One of them was a nurse in a COVID ward who got it at work. But we isolated her quickly, and there was no spread. So we were extremely, extremely lucky, and still continue to be. And I am happy to tell you that tomorrow, we will have Community Care, one of our healthcare partners, on site doing vaccinations for our neighbors. A few of them are already vaccinated. We've been fighting nonstop to get the vaccine here on site. And so that starts tomorrow. And I'm really thrilled about that.
That you stole my question. I was going to ask about vaccine rollout. So great, fantastic news. But what other, I think, crises presents an opportunity to either advance some of the best practices that you or not best practices, advance some of kind of the innovative thinking that you wondered, oh, we really just need the opportunity or the funding to implement. Or, presents an opportunity to say, okay, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And what can we replicate and continue on in the future? So what kind of innovations and learnings have you come across and want to carry on beyond the pandemic?
I honestly think that most organizations could probably write a book about that. Like all of the lessons learned, the things that you're just like, wow, this really taught us. I think for us, it reinforced a lot of things that we already knew. First of all, we knew that our neighbors were resilient. We also know that our neighbors aren't the strongest rule followers in the world. And so the mask wearing has been difficult. But we've learned a lot about communication, about how to help make sure that messages get out to the village. And so we have multiple platforms that we use for neighbor communication. We have a neighbor communication platform called Rallyhood, where neighbors can post questions and concerns, complaints. You know, when they're mad about something, they like to go to Rallyhood and post it. It's kind of like the community first village of first village version of Nextdoor, right? So we have our own version of that. And so having that, and then we have a text messaging platform, which even when our neighbors are housed, maintaining the same cell phone is a challenge. And so we've got a great process in place for checking in with them regularly. So we have the most updated phone number for them so that we can send text messages when we need to get urgent communications out. So to me, a lot of the lessons learned were around communication. I think we've also really learned some lessons about, you know, one of the questions people ask us all the time is, do you have security guards at Community First Village? And they're real clear on the guards part. Like, do you have guards? Do you have cops that are coming on there with, you know, with their guns packing and all that? And I'm like, we do have security at Community First Village. And today it's about 260 people, because that's how many people live here. And every neighbor that lives here is part of that. And so we communicate that to them all the time. This is your neighborhood. And if something's going on, we need to know. We do have cameras throughout the property, so we are able to get eyes on things when things are going on. But those cameras aren't monitored. It's not, you know, they're there to be able to capture an incident if it occurs, so that we can go back and have a record of what happened. So, for example, if a neighbor tripped and fell, we want to be able to go back and see, was it something about the landscaping that needs to be remedied so that we ensure that they don't fall again? So I think what we've continued to learn is that one of the best assets we have as a community is the entire neighborhood, right? All of the neighbors coming together. And so it's not unusual. I was just out walking the village before this started, and neighbors will stop me and they'll say, hey, I need you to know about this. Like, I need you to know about this thing that I want you guys to work on. And I mean, truly, our doors are open, and I'll have neighbors come in here, just, you know, walk right in and be like, let me tell you about the things that need to change. And to me, what the key is, and I think what any crisis presents for an organization, is an opportunity to think about whose voices you listen to. And it's easy sometimes in an organization to say, we're going to listen just to the voices of the other staff members. And they have perspective and insight. But for all of us, the voices of the people we serve have to be at the center of what we do. And Community First Village was designed based on the voices of our neighbors. And that really is key to us. I want to hear from them. I want them to walk directly into my office. I want them to stop me when I'm walking through the village, because I want to hear from them. I want to hear what they love about living here. And I also want to hear what's hard about living here, what's not as it could be yet. Because even as we're designing, so right now we're designing the next 2 phases, and the designs have evolved based on what our neighbors have told us, based on their lived experience in this community. How do we improve upon what we've already done? And that will always be, for all of us, what drives the way that we lead this organization, that their voices have to be at the center. And honestly, Community First Village would not exist if not for our neighbors' voices, if not for the fact that they have told us what they needed. So Mobile Loaves Fishes started as a food truck ministry, right? We were out on the streets. We still are. We've been doing that for 22 years, every single day of the year in Austin, Texas. Our food trucks are out there, and we are serving people who are currently experiencing homelessness. And it was that experience, that knowledge from just listening to them for years, that told us that we wanted to create something new and a different approach. And so Community First Village literally came from them. And when you look around this village and you look at what's been created, their voices are represented in everything that you see.
Yeah, I mean, see, this is why we brought Amber to y'all. We wanted you to hear her from her. Okay, so I actually am not going to cringe so much about my conversation about socks, delivering socks, because you build that relationship, and that was the entree, and that is what showed that it needs to be more than. And so I want to talk about the more than. When we visited, we were kind of on the ground floor. I remember, like, I think I even took a sneak picture of the 3D model home. Like, I did share with my husband, but I didn't share with anybody else. But it was really kind of top secret at that moment. But since then, I think you guys have kind of really launched the 3D model. And I also think that there's this, micro community that you've increased. But I've talked a lot about housing, but I really want folks who, and you all know this, but I want folks who, listening in, that it's just the village is much more than housing. There is a car center. There is an organic farm. You mentioned that. There's an Airbnb, tiny homes and RVs and such, Airbnb. There's movie screenings. There's an art shop for residents to build. And I just want to share, I'm wearing a necklace that I bought at Community First. There's an art house where residents can put together, wares to sell. Not just at Community First, but at different what do you call them? Different events throughout the community. So can you share with us, not only the footprint of housing, but all that makes that the Community First Village?
Yeah, I would love to. So it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So where I always start is to think about when people are experiencing homelessness, what opportunities do they have to earn income, right? And number one on the list is panhandling, really. And if you think about occupational licensing, at least in the state of Texas, and I think this is probably true in Arizona, like back in the day, years ago, people used to be able to sell bottles of water. They used to be able to wash windows. They used to be able to do all kinds of things on the street corner to be able to earn money versus having to stand there and fly a sign in order for someone to make a choice to give them money, right? And so that has always been a driver for us, recognizing that our neighbors are incredibly entrepreneurial and incredibly hardworking. Surviving homelessness, surviving on the streets day in and day out requires resilience. It requires grit. And quite frankly, you just see a tremendous amount of work ethic, right? I know folks that I've met. One of the things that Mobile Loaves and Fishes does is street retreats, where we go out and we'll spend 24, 48, 72 hours. Not in any, we are not trying to know what it's like to be homeless, because we could never, because we're going to go back to our home at the end. But we do it to build relationships, right? And to connect human to human, heart to heart with our friends who are out there struggling and suffering. And every time I do a street retreat, I come back in awe of the work ethic, the way that people are, collecting cans or whatever their thing is, collecting scrap metal and using that to be able to earn income. But we've outlawed a lot of the things that people can do when they're on the streets. And so at Mobile Loaves and Fishes, we've created what we call our Community Works program, right? We want people to have the opportunity to work. Everyone that lives at Community First Village pays rent to live here, without exception. Every single person that lives here pays rent. And they have an opportunity to earn their rent through working on site at the village. And so Joan mentioned a whole bunch of the opportunities that are there. We have an incredible art program where we make jewelry, and they do fine art and pottery, ceramics, all kinds of incredible things that our neighbors make in those programs. And some of them come with their own gifts. Some of them, they already were talented artists before, and some they've never painted before. They've never done anything before, anything artistic before in their lives. And then they have the opportunity to learn. And so we have amazing artists that come on site to volunteer. They'll teach classes. And a lot of times they'll just sit with someone and say, I'm going to teach you how to throw pottery, or I'm going to teach you how to make this thing. And then when the neighbor sells that product, they have the opportunity to earn income. And we call the income that our neighbors earn in our programs dignified income. It's income that brings dignity. And our goal is really to help the neighbor understand their gifts and talents. What were they uniquely created to do? What are they good at? And how can we find something that they love to do, that when they wake up in the morning, they're excited that they get to go do that? So for some of our neighbors, it's to go work in the art program. For others, we have a car care shop. So we have a lot of neighbors who, had experience working on cars. And so we do oil changes and state inspections and car washes and car detailing here. And so some neighbors work in that business. We have a culinary program on site where we serve food, right? So when people are coming out to the village to volunteer, they're coming here for an event, they can get a burger, or they can get, a salad that is made by our team here. And then, of course, we have a property beautification program. So one of the things people always comment on when they come to the village is how beautiful it is. And so most of that work is done by our neighbors who live here. They have the opportunity to earn dignified income by mowing, by weed eating, by participating in the property beautification. And neighbors have the opportunity to try all different types of work that they want to try. So every month we host a job fair where we lay out for neighbors all of the work opportunities that exist here. And we give them the opportunity to meet the members of our team that oversee each of those, so that then they can meet a person who can explain to them, what does this entail? So some of the neighbors will come and say, well, I've never done art before. So, that doesn't sound like something I could make work. And Carlos, who runs the art house, will say, well, how about if you come see me tomorrow and let me show you what we do. And, let me show you some of the options, because we've created really diverse opportunities for people that span all mobility levels, all levels of artistic expression. And our goal is to be as creative as possible. So we have neighbors. We have a neighbor who is in a wheelchair, who's an amputee, and he works on our property beautification team. And his role is that he has a blower, right? So when someone's mowing or weed eating, he's like making sure that all of that gets cleared. And that's the role that he plays. And he's super proud of that. And he loves it. I love when I look out my window and I see him, just wheeling around the village, making things look beautiful. And he's a great friend of mine. And he is a Dallas Cowboys fan, and I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, so don't hate me for it, all you Cardinals fans. But he comes into my office and, always has a comment for me about the fact that I have Eagles things in my office. And he tells me that I shouldn't be allowed to live in Texas and have such terrible taste in football teams, that you shouldn't allow Philadelphia Eagles fans to be in Cowboys country. And that's my buddy.
There are some great questions in the chat, and we'll try to pull them in as where they fit. You started to touch on it, Amber, about some of the like the car care business and things like that, ways that you connect to the community. I was so in awe of the movie theater, and I have to tell a story about the movie theater, and then the dog park. So I was amazed by this outdoor amphitheater where Amber explained to us that, sort of opposite weather to us, I think it's March through October, maybe. Whatever months of the year, you have free movies for the whole community, and everyone comes, and it's this big fun event where you sell food and show popular movies, and it sounded like an amazing way to bring the community in. And when we were leaving, we called an Uber, and Community First is a little bit, I would say, out in the country. It's, not in downtown Austin, and you had construction going on. And so we were thinking, like, how is this guy going to find us with this? You had to go in a different entrance than the normal entrance, and explain that we were on the corner of Hope and Goodness Way, or I don't even remember. And he got there, and we said, oh, we're so glad you found us. He's like, oh, I come there all the time for the movies with my family. Of course I know how to get here. So it's real, it works. It was amazing. So if you could tell us a little bit about the movies, the dog park, the ways that you connect to the community and bring in your neighbors that are outside of the property.
Yeah. So we talked at the beginning about it was mentioned, the vision statement of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which is to empower communities into a lifestyle of service with our friends who have experienced homelessness, right? And so everything that we do here is about inviting people in, right? Obviously, COVID has made this a little bit more challenging because we basically had the village have to be closed to people, which is, it just makes us so sad to not be able to invite the community in the same ways that we have. Although we've gotten really creative to figure out COVID safe ways to do things, including transitioning our movies, which used to happen in our outdoor amphitheater, that are right now happening. We've created our own drive-in movie theater on our phase 2 parking lot. We have a large parking lot. And so we have a custom screen that's been built for us. And so we're doing drive-in movies. And so we have our next one on Friday. We're showing Trolls. And so it'll be awesome. I love coming out here with my kids, opening up the back and, going to a drive-in movie, getting popcorn and just sitting there as a family and watching a fun movie together. So that's been our COVID pivot to that. But all throughout the year, in a non-COVID life, we are welcoming people to the village. Probably my favorite thing that we do here during the holiday season is called the Village of Lights. And so we basically create a winter wonderland at the village. There are Christmas lights kind of around the main loop of the village, and they're all choreographed to music. We have had in past years 250 to 300,000 Christmas lights. And then Santa and Mrs. Claus are here for photos. There's a photo booth. And we create a big version of our market where we're selling the products that our neighbors make. And we're inviting the entire community to come, and they can watch a holiday movie. So just think, A Christmas Carol or Elf, or one of your favorite Christmas movies is what we're showing on our, in our amphitheater. People are all bundled up in their coats. If it actually is cold in Texas, although sometimes they're in their shorts, just like Arizona, it might be 70 in December, or it could be 30. You never quite know. But we host this really amazing holiday event. And the whole purpose of it is to welcome people into this community and give them the opportunity to understand what we do, to understand who our neighbors are. And really, I believe that we're inviting them to be in awe of who our neighbors were created to be. Because when you walk into that market and you see the incredible art that they've made, you see a hand forged bottle opener that someone made in our blacksmithing shop, or you see a beautiful cutting board that someone crafted in our woodworking program, you see their talents, you see their gifts, and you want to invest in that, right? You want to invest in them, not just by buying their product, but by getting to know them. And so I love that our neighbors, they'll hang out in the market so that they can talk to the person that's purchasing the product that they've made and be able to tell them a story. I love having a neighbor say, this is what inspired me to create this painting. And I think one of my favorite quotes, Brene Brown says, people are hard to hate close up. And so I believe that part of what we do at the village, and the reason that we host events, is lots of people have a lot of feelings about our friends who have experienced homelessness. And so for us to be able to meet them and hear from them and hear their stories and look in their eyes, it really can be that transformative moment, because now they know someone who has experienced homelessness. This is Gary. This is Shorty. This is Bonnie. They know them and they've heard their story. And it really begins to change their mind and their heart. And that's really the business that we're in, right? We're in the business of changing minds and hearts, because we need both. My changed minds and changed hearts also helps to push forward political will, which Joan mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so going into political will, perfect segue. We know that healthcare and a livable wage and affordable homes are paths out of homelessness, but we also need political will. And so I remember hearing some interesting stories of Alan finding this property finally. What did garnering political will look like as you built the community first concept? And I guess now, as someone asked about 51 acres, you didn't start at 51 acres, and now that you're expanding, what does the political will continue to look like?
Well, we learned a lot of hard lessons about political will in the journey to get to this point. And I think one of the biggest lessons we learned is that when you're creating something like this, people like the idea of it, but they don't always like the reality of it. And that's really the whole journey of Community First Village. Is when Alan first sat down with the mayor of Austin at the time, all those years ago, to pitch the concept, the mayor loved the idea. And he said, we need one in every corner of Austin, north, south, east, and west. And of course, just overjoyed. Yes, we're going to be able to bring this vision to life. And then the political will came to be. And the Not in My Backyard movement is often what makes political will crumble, right? Political will often fades in the face of angry neighborhoods and people who are really mad about the fact that you want to build a place for those people. If you want to see like fiery rage in Amber Fogarty, and I'm sure in most of you, call my friends those people. Do not in my presence, because it makes me real angry. But that was really the journey, right? It was the journey of, I think that what you're doing is great and it makes a lot of sense, but I don't think that this area of town is the right one. right? And how many times have we all heard that story for any, no matter what we're doing for a vulnerable population, right? It's, I applaud you. I think you're a really good person for doing that. And the journey for Mobile Loaves and Fishes included, Alan and our team, Alan and his wife, Trisha, being at neighborhood meetings where they were assaulted, they were spit on. The police had to be called to escort them from those neighborhood meetings. And that happened. We had 3 properties inside the city limits, and we currently do not sit on any of those 3 pieces of property. Today we started with a 27-acre tract of land that is outside the city limits. We share a property line with the city of Austin, but we are not in the city. And then we were able to purchase the contiguous 24 acres to make this 51-acre master planned community. But one of the advantages that we have in the state of Texas is that there is no zoning outside a municipal boundary in the state of Texas. And so we were able to to overcome the political will issue, right? So when Alan went back to the mayor and said, hey, here's the reality of the situation. I'm going to go outside the city and I'm going to take the pressure off of you. It turns out that was a gift because the political will didn't matter as much then. They didn't have to worry about it because not in my backyard. They can argue and yell all they want, but if the zoning piece isn't there, if you don't need a zoning change, then you can move forward. And so that's really what paved the way for us. And political will is a part of, still part of our lives every day. We continue to build relationships with our political leaders. But one of the realities that we acknowledge is that political leadership continues to change, and we remain steady, that we will go through plenty of administrations of local, state, and national leadership in the time that we're doing our work. And so we are thoughtful about the amount of energy we expend, and really thoughtful about the ways in which we engage politically. And that requires a lot of discernment, but I will tell you that I engaged pretty significantly in the political landscape over the last several weeks during the storm, calling upon city leaders to come alongside all of the community leaders that were doing the work to get people who were unsheltered into safe shelter during the storm so that they didn't die. Right now, I am working hard with our political leaders to ensure that the people that did die, that we don't hide that story, that we allow that story to see the light of day, because when people die in a disaster like what we experienced here in Austin, there is sometimes an effort, as we all know, to not let that story find daylight. And so I've gone humbly to city leaders and said, I need you to care about this with us. I need you to ensure that we know the names of the people who died so that we can memorialize them. And I just want to pin one more thing on this topic, that for me, 2 of the most profound moments when I lived in Arizona, I already told you the Grand Canyon story, but the other, I spent time, one of the things that Andre House does is bury the dead. And so Andre House goes to White Tank Cemetery to lay people to rest who have not been identified. And I did that a number of times during my time in Phoenix, and of anything that I have ever done, that moment has been with me ever since. And when I tour people and take people through the village, and I take them to our columbarium where we bury our neighbors who have passed away, I tell them that story because being in White Tank Cemetery and burying people where no one who knew them on this earth is there to lay them to rest, it continues to be one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever experienced. And I find it unacceptable that exists in a country as abundant as the United States of America, that people die without their families ever knowing, and at Andre House, when I was there, people would call unable to find their family member, convinced that their dad had passed away or their sister was gone forever. And honestly, then I would be in White Tank Cemetery praying that the person that we were burying wasn't that woman's sister who I just talked to. And so for here, we want to give people a dignified end of life. And we had someone pass away. We actually have had each of the last 3 weeks, we have had a neighbor pass away here. And last Monday, we came back after the winter storm. First day, everybody's back in the office. First day, it's safe to travel again. And we get here, and that afternoon, we get word that our neighbor Bonnie had passed away. And Bonnie was the official welcomer of Community First Village. She was always there at the entrance of the village to welcome people. It was rare that I ever did a tour of Community First Village that Bonnie didn't show up, come up on her electric wheelchair and just get right in on the tour with me to tell stories. And she is just so dear to us. And when she passed away last Monday, what we do when someone dies here, when they die at home, first of all, it is the ultimate death, right? For us, the ultimate death for us is for someone to die in their home, right? When they're home, where they're cared for and loved. And so when after the person dies, we gather at the home, and when the coroner arrives, we all gather. And every coroner that comes to Community First Village knows that when they bring the body out of the home, that they will have to wait, and they will have to give us a bit of time so that we can say goodbye and so that we can pray before the person leaves the village. And so last Monday, we all gathered. I would say, there were probably, our whole staff, our missionals and other neighbors all together, and they brought Bonnie's body out of her home, and they stopped and we prayed and we said goodbye. And as she drove away, we were all waving. We were saying, goodbye, Bonnie. We love you. We'll miss you. And then she will come home, and we will be able to lay her to rest in our columbarium here. And that will be her permanent resting place. That brings us a lot of peace when we lose someone, because the grief of losing them is so intense. And for us, we have these waves of grief when neighbors die. 3 in 3 weeks is a really hard thing for all of us. But we balance the grief with the joy of the relationship, the joy of them being home, and the joy of them having people who are there to celebrate their life. And the difference between what happens here and what I experienced in White Tank Cemetery couldn't be more different, right? That was the loneliest, saddest ending for someone's life. And I believe that what we experience here every time someone dies is, it's true community coming together to celebrate and mourn together.
Thank you, Amber. That was beautiful. Yeah, that was really beautiful. I'm sure now, I know folks who are listening in, why we brought Amber. That we're on fire for this conversation. It's beautiful. It's something that we want to replicate here in Arizona. And, the group, we talked about who could be our Alan Graham, who could be our Amber Fogarty, who could be, or where do we see glimpses of community first in Arizona? And, I'm just like, I think about the Coalition for Compassion and Justice in Prescott. I think about Osnon Manor. I think about 209 West Jackson. And I know I'm not, these are just little things, little glimpses of it. I just wonder, and I know each community that comes to you, and I know it's not just Arizona. I know, actually, I think internationally folks in this field come to you to figure out that special sauce that you guys have created. And so, what would you say are some of the essential components that need to be integrated into housing projects to strengthen that sense of community?
I think that it being built in a relational way. And I didn't catch the full question, but I saw a question that came across in the chat about how hard it is to replicate the relational aspect of what we do. And so for us, one of our guiding principles of Mobile Loaves Fishes is to be a multiplier, right? And so when I look at what we do here, we have a staff today of about 60 people. There are about 50 missionals who live here. And then there are literally tens of thousands of volunteers that are part of what we do. And pre-COVID, we averaged 285 volunteers every single week. And that's really, to me, that's the secret sauce, right? The secret sauce is empowering people into a lifestyle of service where they make this part of their life, right? Where they want to be part of it. And when I think about my experience at Andre House was full of volunteers who were empowered into a lifestyle of service, right? There were volunteers when I was at Andre House 17 years ago who had been there. We celebrated the 20th anniversary, I think was when I was there. It was either 20th or 25th, I can't remember. But volunteers that had been there the entire time. And then I have gone back many times. I was just in Arizona a couple years ago to visit. And I went on Thursday night, which was the night that I was there every Thursday night for, a year and a half that I lived in Arizona. And I went on Thursday night, and some of the same people, I've been gone for all these years, and some of the same people are there every Thursday night, there to serve, there to show up. And so all of our organizations have people who embody that lifestyle of service. And that's the key to replicating this, right? It's how do you bring people who have that lifestyle of service together to do this? Because, Alan and I both, we love when people, we think it's very entertaining when people say that we need an Alan or we need an Amber or we need both. I'm like, you really don't, right? You need passionate, fired up leaders, right? And on this call is a whole bunch of passionate, fired up leaders, right? That's what we all are. That's why we do this work. And that's all Alan and I are. We're just passionate people. We love what we do. We love our friends. And we desire to use the gifts that we've been given in service of them, right? And that's really all you need. And so sometimes people want it to be more complicated than that. And I'm like, I promise it isn't. You need the leaders that are willing to walk this path and know that you don't walk it alone. Alan has been walking this path for 22 plus years, but never for 1 minute did he walk the path alone. And every step of the way, he was bringing other leaders alongside of him. I've been alongside of him in this journey he and I've known each other 14 years now. So we've got a pretty long history going. But I mean, the list of the other leaders that have been part of this movement, and some of them, came and they were part of it for a year or two, right? So we need people that have a season of life to help. And then we also need the lifestyle of service people who this is their life's work, this is their calling, and they are going to keep working on this until the day they die. So that's really what I think you need. I think you just need people who come together, and you have to have the resilience and the persistence to not allow because the Not in My Backyard movement, they want nothing more than to crush our spirits, y'all. They want to crush our spirits, and we can't let them, right? And to me, I've grown to a place, and it's taken a lot of years to grow to a place where I appreciate them. I appreciate their resistance, and I accept the challenge of transforming their hearts and minds. That's how I look at Not in My Backyard. And it's taken a lot of years of thoughtful reflection and prayer to get to that place. But I tell people all around Austin, I'm like, bring me your fiercest NIMBY. Bring them to me. Come on, bring them all over here because I want to know them. And I want to have the opportunity to invite them into a new way of thinking and maybe a new way of living.
I appreciate as a coalition employee, I appreciate the accept and appreciate the challenge. Coalition work is hard, and we all have to come together and break down those organizational silos and build and garner that political and community will. So I really appreciate that. Well, Amber, and I did have tech challenges, so I missed some of the chat, but I think you got to the conversation about, do we need 51 acres? That relational focus in terms of replication. I think you captured that. I did see, and I'll share with you that, man, evictions, they are just a spur in my saddle. What does Community First do in terms of, if somebody can't pay their rent?
Well, the way that we always describe it is that the grace and mercy rope is longer here than any other place you're going to find. It is long. And for us, the way that we think about it, if someone's not paying their rent, there's a reason, right? There's a reason why they're not paying their rent. And so it's important to us to get to the why. What's happening? Have they relapsed? Did someone take advantage of them financially, which happens to our neighbors far too often? There are all kinds of reasons why people don't pay their rent, right? I will tell you that we really virtually do not have a rent collection problem, and that we really work hard at helping our neighbors understand that whole process. But then also in the wraparound services that we have, the case management that's on site, we have a work alongside an organization called Family Elder Care, and they have a money management program. And so our neighbors have the opportunity to have someone who's case managing them specifically around money management, which makes a big, big difference. So if someone consistently month after month is having trouble with their rent, we will refer them to that money management program to give them the opportunity to have someone assist them in that process. But really, it's, you know, it is one neighbor at a time, right? It's understanding that there's a reason if they're not paying their rent. There's a reason if they're breaking the rules consistently. And I will tell you, I mean, Joan, you said it well. Like evictions, like that's the worst part of everything that we do. And at times we do have to evict people. I will tell you that at Community First Village, we never evict anyone until we believe we have exhausted every option. Every option. Not just that Mobile Loaves Fishes has done that, but that every partner organization that is here on site, that we've met with them, we've talked through with them, what other options do we have? How can we get them, you know, if it's a rent collection issue, if there's a behavior challenge that's really, because community first means that we have to put the needs of the whole community first. And so sometimes people's behavior can be really problematic. And I think one of the things that we've learned is that we can be really effective in permanent homes for the vast majority of our friends, but there are going to be some people who they're not able to be successful here. And so our goal is whenever possible, if they have to be evicted, if they have to exit, how do we exit them to housing elsewhere versus exiting them back to homelessness? And so that's how we approach it. We shed a lot of tears about it. You know, I've sat in, you know, rooms with our team where, you know, we're all just, we're not there yet. There's something else we can try. We haven't tried this, you know, just every option, every opportunity to figure out a way, because, you know, our goal is permanency, right? We want them to be here for the rest of their lives. And that's the last thing that we want to do is have to exit someone. Even if we're exiting them to another place to live, like, we also don't love that. Like, we want them to live here in this community with us. So that's how we approach it.
Yeah, fair. Thank you. So we're rounding out at the end of our show. I just wanted to, or show, whatever, wanted to, you know, share that we talked about replication, but, you know, how do we, you know, we talked about how we can copy, but how is Community First going to go on beyond? I mean, we talked about the fact that you guys have purchased some new land, and there was a question of how many residents are there, but, you know, what's the long-term goal of Community First?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, we have about 260 folks that live here today. We have on phase one, 225 homes, and then we're building 310 additional homes on phase two. And of the 310 we're building on phase two, about 120 are in some phase of completion, some already done, and then others that are under construction right now. We will be completely built out on phase two in the next 2 years. We will complete that. We are currently site planning, and we will make a public announcement about this in Austin in April. So we will be announcing publicly. This is becoming relatively well-known news in Austin at this point, but we're going to make our official public announcement in April that we have acquired 126 additional acres. So phase three will be directly across the street from our current village, and that ironically is 51 acres. So we got 51 acres on this side of Hog Eye Road, and we'll have 51 acres on that side of Hog Eye Road. So we are site planning and developing that piece of property right now. And then we have an additional 76 acres that will become phase four of Community First Village. And that's about 15 minutes away from this site. So both of those are in development right now. We will submit site development permits for those in the next several months. That process takes some time. It takes about a year to get a site development permit. So our hope is that by the end of April of 2022, that we'll have site development permits and be able to break ground on those phases. And those are both outside the city limits as well. Both ironic. So the one that's across the street, obviously that's already, it's in the same vicinity, right? So that's in the county as well. But then the additional 76 acres that we acquired, amazing story where we're meeting with one of our donors, telling him about our dreams for the future, telling him about the struggles that we're having finding land that meets our needs, that has access to transportation, that's, you know, outside the city limits. And he says, I own this 76-acre piece of land and it's in the county. I think it's surrounded by the city limits. Let me go look at it and I'll call you later. He calls us later and says, yeah, sure enough. So do you guys want to go see it? Of course we do. So we go and see it. And he's like, yeah, I'll donate it. So just tell me how you want to get that done. And just those are the kinds of incredible things that happen. So we will be adding between those two phases, 1,400 more homes in the years ahead. So obviously a lot of growth locally here in Austin for us is ahead and on the horizon, and lots of hiring. We're hiring a whole lot of people this year to prepare for our growth. So I just ask for y'all to, send your good energy and all your positive thoughts and your prayers our way as we continue to grow, because there is a lot of goodness on the horizon for Community First Village.
I love it, Amber. Thank you. There's been a lot to digest, just a lot of awesomeness that I've heard, that a lot of goodness. So I'm gonna lean into that Chief Goodness Officer conversation. A lot of goodness here. Now, as we come to a close, I'll share with you, like I shared earlier, that the Housing Coalition works with local communities and agencies in our state to address the housing gap and to respond to homelessness. We can be in partners together to facilitate a progress towards that end of homelessness. We host workshops and like this and the eviction forum that we had last November. And we hold our annual conference. And to that end, we're still planning on hosting our annual statewide conference on affordable housing and ending homelessness, in person or otherwise. So mark your calendars for October 27th and 28th, but use a pencil to write in the location of the Mesa Convention Center in case we do need to shift to a virtual time together. I wanted to highlight the theme of this year because there's a lot of threads that we've heard, and it's the power of we. So when Arizona first went into lockdown in March of 2020, a wave of uncertainty and fear was felt as a people, as we were told to stay at home and to save lives, but schools and businesses and offices closed, but communities did not. Our first responders and grassroots groups were there to come up with innovative ways to help during this crisis. The conference theme of The Power of We explores the power of collective expertise, energies, and efforts. Ensuring safe, affordable homes for all Arizonans includes ending homelessness and providing adequate housing supply, but helping people stay housed requires community. Designing, building, and nurturing inclusive communities where people feel a sense of belonging. Who are the people in your community? Like that song, that Sesame Street song. We'll talk about that. Who are the people in your neighborhood? And how do we harness our collective power to cultivate community for all? I'd like to thank my panelist in crime, who's on fire for this, Jessica Berg. I'd like to thank John Bradley for his connection and initial introduction to Community First and for Brookfield residential support of this conversation. And I'd like to thank Amber Fogarty with Mobile Loaves Fishes for sharing her passion and her expertise and what community looks like for our neighbors down in Austin. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. As a reminder, we'll be sending out this recording of this conversation for all registered attendees. And with that, I wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you. So great to see you always, Amber.
Oh, it was great to see you too. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, y'all keep in touch. Keep me posted whenever this happens in Arizona and there's a groundbreaking that happens. I want to be there with you.
Oh, you will be here.
I want to be there to celebrate because yeah, it would make my whole life for it to happen there, of all places.